essentially when you enter into a legally binding contract, whether that is a mortgage or a business partnership or like a corporate merger, there is a universal expectation of consequences.
Right.
It operates on a kind of transactional physics. I mean, you sign a mortgage with a bank, and then you stop paying the mortgage, the bank takes the house.
Yeah, it's quite binary.
Exactly, it's binary. A breach of contract has a penalty, and that predictability is basically the bedrock of a functioning society. But, when you step into the world of modern family law, that fundamental law of societal physics seems to just, well, it stops working.
It really does.
In fact, we are looking at a legal landscape today that appears completely inverted.
Yeah, it is the absolute definition of institutional muddy waters.
Yeah.
I mean, in most contract law, the party that breaks the agreement pays the damages.
Right.
But in the specific arena of family law, we frequently see a system where the financial penalties seem to apply heaviest to the person who actually wants to keep the contract intact.
Which is wild.
It is. While the party initiating the dissolution is shielded or sometimes even financially rewarded.
And that inversion is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Before we get into the weeds, just take a second right now to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep bringing you these massive, unfiltered explorations of complex ideas.
Absolutely.
So today we are doing an extensive review of an incredibly controversial new ebook. It has been dominating discussions across the red-pilled manosphere and men's rights activist forums.
Yeah, it's everywhere right now.
It is called Britain's Abortion and Divorce Epidemic, The Downfall of the Patriarchy, and that's by Conrad Riker.
This text is, well, it's quite the lightning rod.
It really is. I mean, if you are trying to understand the history of our institutions before they were, as the author argues anyway, captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies, this is the text people are pointing to as the definitive breakdown. And I'll tell you right now, if you find this deep dive fascinating and you want to read the source material for yourself, you can go buy the book right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Highly recommend checking out the primary source.
Yeah, and you absolutely should follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack. That is conradriker.substack.com. This book is written specifically for men who feel like the system is rigged against them. So it offers this really harsh, unvarnished look at modern society.
But, before we dive into the actual mechanics of his claims, we really need to pause and lay some essential groundwork for you.
Yeah, please do.
Because this book contains highly politically charged content. We want to make it absolutely clear to you that we are not taking sides here.
Not at all.
Right. Nor are we endorsing the viewpoints of the author. Our mission today is strictly to impartially report on the factual content provided in the text. We just want to help you understand the ideas Riker is presenting in his original source material.
Exactly. We are just your guides through the material. And we have a lot of ground to cover today.
We really do.
We're looking at the weaponization of the family court system, the biological asymmetry of reproductive rights, the resulting demographic Sexodus, which is a crazy term of modern men, and finally, the contrasting playbook of Hungary that the author actually holds up as a solution.
Yeah, it's a huge scope.
So let's just start at the very foundation of society, which is marriage. The premise here is that marriage has been transformed from a sacred, lifelong pact into this state-sanctioned financial trap.
Right, so the book frames this whole argument around a concept he calls feminine feudalism.
Feminine feudalism.
Yeah. He points out that marriage is currently the only contract in Western society where a breach of promise can be actively incentivized.
How does he back that up?
Well, he leans heavily on Office for National Statistics data, specifically this finding that 70% of UK divorces are initiated by women.
Okay, 70%. And then he pairs that 70% initiation rate with the statistic that 90% of alimony recipients are female, right?
Precisely. And when you look at the macroeconomics of that, the text states that £9 billion is redistributed annually from ex-husbands to ex-wives through UK courts.
9 billion every year.
Every single year.
Yeah.
And he doesn't mince words. He refers to this massive wealth transfer as marital communism.
But marital communism.
Yeah. The logic here is that a man's future labor, like his future earning capacity, is essentially mortgaged to a partner who unilaterally chose to dissolve the union.
Ah, I see.
It's framed as a system where the state acts as an armed collections agency on behalf of the spouse who leaves.
To kind of ground this in reality, he introduces us to a case study. John from Surrey.
Right, John.
Yeah, so John is an engineer, And this guy worked 80-hour weeks for decades.
Just grinding.
Exactly. He built an incredible life for his family. He paid for a 450,000 pound home. He built up a really solid pension. I mean, he fulfilled the traditional provider role pretty much flawlessly.
By the book.
Yeah. But when the divorce hits, the book details how John lost 60% of his total assets. 60%.
The math is staggering. He actually ended up sleeping in his car for 6 months
Wow.
because his liquid capital was entirely drained by legal fees and the mandated settlement. And meanwhile, his ex-wife kept the primary residence and reportedly went on international vacations with the remaining settlement money. And the family court judge looked at this entire arrangement and stamped it as fair and equitable.
Right, and if you analyze the legal precedent, the text argues that John's story isn't a glitch in the system.
It's not.
No, he says it is the system functioning exactly as designed. And to prove this, the author points to the landmark 2018 Supreme Court case of Owens v. Owens.
Oh, Owens v. Owens. That case is huge.
It's a massive focal point for his thesis on how the system traps men while basically bending over backward for women.
Let's actually unpack the mechanics of Owens v. Owens. Because on the surface, the ruling sounds completely contradictory. It is deeply contradictory. And I think that's why it's so illustrative for him. So in this case, Mr. Owens could not divorce his estranged wife because she wanted to stay married. He was effectively locked in. Yet, Mrs. Owens, when she eventually decided she wanted the divorce, petitioned on the grounds of unreasonable behavior.
All right.
But the Supreme Court ruled that her examples of his behavior, which were essentially just that the marriage was unhappy or like dull any, did not meet the legal threshold for unreasonable behavior.
So they denied it.
Yeah, she was forced to wait out a 5-year separation period. But here's the author's point. He uses the intense public and media outrage over Mrs. Owens having to wait.
Oh, there was a huge outcry.
Exactly, contrasted with the total silence over Mr. Owens being trapped for years. He uses that to show that society only views marriage as a trap when a woman is inconvenienced by it.
That's a fascinating framing.
He argues the system laments when it cannot instantly accommodate female initiation of divorce, but it ignores male entrapment entirely.
And then he contrasts that with the financial precedents, bringing up Miller v. Miller from 2000 cells, which is a crucial pivot in UK family law.
All right, crucial.
So this was a marriage that lasted less than 3 years.
Barely a blip.
Right. Alan Miller was a highly successful fund manager, and Melissa Miller sought a massive payout upon divorce. The House of Lords ultimately awarded her £5 million.
$5 million for under 3 years.
Yeah, and they did so by introducing a radical new concept. They decided that a husband's future earning potential should be considered a joint asset.
Even after a short marriage.
Exactly, even after a short marriage where that wealth hadn't fully materialized yet. 2 years. And suddenly, his ambition, his future sweat equity, his talent, it's all carved up and monetized.
Yep.
The author argues this is the state actively weaponizing female biology.
And, to understand that biological connection, the text heavily references Dr. David Buss.
The evolutionary psychologist.
Right. Very prominent figure. Buss is famous for stating divorce courts didn't create gold diggers, they just gave them legal shovels.
Legal shovels. Man, that's a quote.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the synthesis here relies on the evolutionary psychology concept of female hypergamy.
So, for anyone listening who is unfamiliar, hypergamy is the evolutionary drive to seek resource security and upward mobility in a mate.
Correct. In ancestral times, this meant a woman choosing a strong hunter who could physically protect and provide for offspring in a really harsh environment.
Right, like a basic survival mechanism.
Exactly. It was purely a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
But today, the text argues the environment has changed, but the biological software hasn't.
So it's still running the old code.
Yeah. Modern no-fault divorce laws, combined with precedents like Miller v. Miller, allow women to use the power of the state to secure those resources without having to actually maintain the relationship or, the social contract of marriage.
And he actually maps out how this is practically executed in the courtroom. He calls it the 5 Ds playbook.
Right, the 5 Ds.
Deny, defame, drain, delay, and destroy. This isn't just a metaphor for him. He claims it's a standard operating procedure for divorce lawyers.
It's pretty dark.
Very. You deny access to the children, you defame the husband with abuse allegations to secure legal aid and get favorable positioning.
Right.
Then you drain his financial resources through endless litigation. You delay the proceedings to maximize emotional and financial attrition, And ultimately, you destroy his standing in the community and his financial future.
And he brings some heavy stats to that, too.
Yeah, the book claims that a staggering 68% of no-fault divorces involve fabricated allegations specifically deployed to secure better financial terms.
68%.
He likens it to a highly profitable, state-sanctioned, corporate hostile takeover.
I mean, it's a brutal characterization of the legal process. However, if we look closely at his reliance on biology to explain this behavior, it raises a pretty important analytical question regarding consistency.
Right, and this is where I think any critical reader has to pause and push back on the framework a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the author places the blame heavily on the state for weaponizing female biology and hypergamy. But earlier in the text, he notes that the average British man works 332 unpaid overtime hours a year.
That's a lot of overtime.
And he attributes this to a man's hardwired provider instincts. So my question is, if the man is just acting on his biology by working himself to the bone, and the woman is acting on her biology by seeking resource extraction, aren't they both just running their evolutionary programming?
That's the logical extension, yeah.
So if so, is the author arguing for a return to a state-enforced traditional system that binds those instincts together? Or is he telling men to completely unplug from their own biological drive to provide?
Well, that is the core ideological tension running through the entire book. He really oscillates between two distinct survival strategies.
Okay, how so?
On one hand, he advocates for a return to what he calls patriarchy 2.0, where those male provider instincts are legally protected, socially rewarded, and structurally reinforced by the state.
Like it used to be, in his view.
Right. But on the other hand, recognizing that the current system is hostile to that, he advocates for a total withdrawal, basically telling men to suppress those provider instincts entirely.
Just opt out.
Exactly. He views the current state not as a neutral arbiter of justice, but as a compromised entity that actively subsidizes and weaponizes female biological imperatives while simultaneously penalizing male ones.
So if the financial structure of marriage is effectively a rigged casino, as he puts it, the next logical stress test of the system is reproduction.
Right.
Because the text argues that the legal asymmetry doesn't stop at the wallet. It actually extends into the very genetics of reproduction. If marriage is the financial trap, reproduction is where men lose absolutely all biological and legal autonomy.
And this section of the text is arguably the most provocative. He tackles two heavily charged issues here: abortion and paternity fraud.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
And he frames them both around a singular unifying concept, which is the total legal erasure of male consent.
Let's look at the statistics he provides to build this case. Because he points out that there are 200,000 abortions yearly in the UK.
That's the baseline number he uses, yeah.
And he focuses on the mechanics of how these are approved, specifically under the mental health loopholes of the 1967 Abortion Act.
Right, ground C.
Yes, ground C of that act, which allows termination if continuing the pregnancy involves risk to the physical or mental health of the pregnant woman. So the asymmetry he highlights here is stark.
Very stark.
Women have unilateral veto power over a pregnancy, while the father has zero input, literally none. His consent, his desire for the child, his own mental health, none of it has legal standing.
And to illustrate the real-world consequences of this legal framework, he brings up a really intense European Court of Human Rights case.
Oh, Patterson v. UK?
Yeah, Patterson v. UK from 2020.
This case is heartbreaking or infuriating, depending on how you look at it. You have a father who desperately wants his child. He goes to the clinic, and he stands outside on the pavement holding a cardboard sign that simply says, "Let me be a dad."
Just holding a sign.
That's it. He isn't being violent. He isn't blocking the door. He is just pleading for the life of his unborn child. And the legal response:
It was severe.
the judge slapped him with an injunction and labeled his actions psychological terrorism, eventually jailing him for 6 months.
Yeah. And analytically, what the author is contrasting here is the wildly disparate legal treatment of mental health, based entirely on gender.
How does he break that down?
Well, under the law, a mother can terminate a pregnancy based on the prospective stress or mental anguish it would cause her. That is a protected, state-sanctioned medical right.
Okay.
But when a father experiences profound demonstrable psychological distress over the impending termination of his biological child, not only does he have no legal recourse to intervene, but the mere expression of his grief is criminalized as harassment or terrorism.
Wow.
He argues that the state's monopoly on violence is essentially used to silence his biological imperative.
And if that is how the law handles the prevention of birth, it gets even more legally tangled and frankly kind of dystopian when you look at how it handles the enforcement of fatherhood through paternity fraud.
Yeah, the paternity fraud section is eye-opening.
The book cites that 1 in 10 British men are raising another man's child without knowing it.
1 in 10.
That is an astronomical rate of deception, and the author points out that the law actually shields this deception.
Right. He is referring to Section 26 of the Family Law Reform Act of 1969.
Okay, what does that do?
This law established the presumption of legitimacy. Now, historically, this was a common law principle designed to prevent children from being labeled bastards in an era before DNA testing.
Right, to ensure they had financial support.
Exactly. But today, with 99.9% accurate DNA testing readily available, this archaic law is still enforced.
Still.
Yeah. It presumes that any child born within a marriage is the husband's legal and financial responsibility, even if a DNA test definitively proves he is not the biological father.
It's crazy. And he illustrates how rigid this is with the Reby parentage case from 2021.
Oh, the soldier case.
Yeah, you have a British soldier who is deployed to a literal war zone in Afghanistan.
Right.
He returns home from a grueling deployment to find his wife is pregnant with twins. Now, basic biology and the timeline dictate that these children were conceived while he was thousands of miles away getting shot at.
It's physically impossible for him to be the father.
Exactly. It is physically impossible. They go to court, and the judge orders him to pay child support anyway. The judge explicitly stated on the record that the mother's affair was irrelevant to his financial obligations to those children.
Yeah, and the author uses this to highlight what he sees as the ultimate betrayal by the state. I mean, the state demands the ultimate sacrifice from young men, deploying them to fight its wars, but refuses to protect them from domestic deception when they return.
And the jurisdiction of this ideology doesn't even stop at the border, which blew my mind. Look at the case of Mark, the U.S. Marine.
That one is wild.
In 2008, Mark legally sold his sperm through a clinic in the United States. He signed airtight legal waivers severing all parental rights and responsibilities.
Standard donor stuff.
Completely standard. Fast forward over a decade later. Because of the rise of commercial genetics like 23andMe, someone in England tracks him down.
A continent away.
Yep. Despite having legally waived all ties under U.S. law, the British family courts asserted jurisdiction and forced him to hand over 18% of his income to support this child.
Unbelievable.
The author refers to this as genetic patriarchy. The state will hunt a man across an ocean to enforce his financial utility, completely ignoring legal contracts.
And this creates a staggering legal paradox that the author conceptualizes as financial abortion.
Financial abortion, Ray.
And the argument goes like this. If women have the absolute bodily autonomy to say, my body, my choice, and opt out of the biological, emotional, and financial realities of parenthood at will, why is a man who objects to becoming a father met with charges of criminal negligence and garnished wages? Why is there no legal mechanism for a man to sever his financial obligations at conception, just as a woman can sever her biological ones?
And he brings the receipts on the finances of this, too.
He does. He backs this up with the financial footprint, noting that the state spends £63 million through the NHS for post-abortion therapy for women, and private abortion clinics generate £89 million annually in profit, all within an ecosystem that entirely erases paternal rights.
I understand the legal asymmetry he is highlighting totally. But again, I have to admit some confusion with the internal logic of the book here.
That's so.
Because on one hand, he leans really heavily into evolutionary psychology. He argues that hunter-gatherers saw children as survival insurance and genetic gold.
Right.
And he heavily criticizes modern society for denying men their evolutionary right to a legacy and a family. But then, literally pages later, he is praising young men who are getting vasectomies at age 25 to avoid financial ruin.
Yeah, it seems contradictory.
Exactly. How does he reconcile this deep, fundamental evolutionary drive to procreate with the very retreat he is celebrating?
Well, it is a fascinating paradox of adaptation. The author isn't claiming that the biological desire to have children has magically vanished from the male psyche.
Right.
He is arguing that the legal ecosystem has become so incredibly toxic and punitive that a man's rational logic is forcefully overriding his biological programming.
So it's a defensive move.
Exactly. He views the vasectomy not as rejection of fatherhood, but as a strategic retreat from a battlefield where the rules of engagement guarantee his destruction.
Man.
In his view, young men are running a sophisticated risk assessment. They're weighing the probability of paternity fraud, lifelong alimony, state-enforced child support for children they might be legally denied access to, and concluding that fulfilling the evolutionary drive is simply not worth the guarantee of legal and financial annihilation.
So when the risk matrix looks like that, the logical adaptation is a full system opt-out. And the natural consequence of this legal asymmetry is a massive behavioral shift in the population. Which brings us to the demographic data.
The macro scale of it.
Yeah, because the direct consequence of all this, according to the book, is a massive, silent male strike that is basically destroying the nation's future.
Yeah, he relies on some startling demographic data to illustrate this concept of the
The
Sexodus.
Sexodus!
He cites surveys showing that 53% of men under the age of 30 now completely refuse to participate in long-term relationships.
Over half.
Over half. Marriage rates have plummeted 40% since no-fault divorce became widespread and culturally normalized.
And just look at where that displaced energy is going. He notes that Tinder has lost 40% of its male users since 2021.
They're just logging off.
Right. Meanwhile, Pure Gym reported a 300% spike in male memberships over a similar period.
That's a huge shift in behavior.
Guys are looking at the dating market, looking at the legal risks, logging off the apps entirely, and just channeling their energy into lifting weights and self-improvement outside the context of relationships.
And to contextualize this on a global scale, he draws a direct macroeconomic parallel to Japan's herbivore men, the Soshikuke Danshi.
Right, I've heard of that.
Yeah, in Japan, 43% of males under 40 are actively rejecting romantic relationships. And the cascading effect of that is that a record 64% of Japanese women in their 20s are now single.
Wow.
The author suggests Britain is on this exact same trajectory, moving rapidly toward a demographic winter.
He quotes the demographer Tomas Sabatka, who delivered this absolutely brutal image. He said, "A society without children is a retirement home with a flag."
Oof, that's heavy.
I mean, that paints such a bleak picture of what happens when the next generation simply isn't born.
And that ties directly into his economic analysis, which he categorizes as the 4Ds death spiral: decline, debt, dependency, and disintegration.
The 4Ds.
Yeah, and to put hard numbers to this, he brings in figures from the Adam Smith Institute. They calculate that each terminated pregnancy, or essentially each missing child from the replacement rate, costs Britain £3 million in lost economic productivity over a 70-year lifespan.
3 million per person.
Yes. And when you aggregate that across the declining birth rates, he claims this represents a £600 billion annual hit to the nation's future potential. It's an economic black hole.
So what does this all mean for the future of the state, according to him? Because he points out a massive structural irony.
Right.
He says modern progressive and feminist institutions are relying entirely on the sons of traditional families to fund their future pensions and health care.
Yeah, it's quite the paradox.
Because right now, 68% of the UK's birth rate collapse is only being offset by migrant families who still hold highly traditional patriarchal values. He says you can't torch the wheat fields and then beg for bread when winter comes.
It is a very compelling economic metaphor. I mean, he is arguing that a modern welfare state is fundamentally a Ponzi scheme.
Because it needs young workers.
Exactly. It requires a continuously expanding tax base of young, productive workers to support its aging, retiring population. And by legislatively disincentivizing men from forming families through punitive family courts, and by culturally celebrating childlessness as a form of liberation, society is cannibalizing its own future tax base.
But let me challenge this macroeconomic framing for a second.
Go for it.
If you are listening to this and thinking, well, wait a minute, aren't crushing housing prices the real reason people aren't having kids? You aren't alone in that thought.
Sure.
The author uses that vivid analogy, torching wheat fields, to blame the pension crisis squarely on feminist legal capture. But isn't he completely ignoring the massive macroeconomic realities that exist outside of family court?
Like inflation and housing.
Yeah. We have unprecedented housing costs, wage stagnation, rampant inflation, the insane cost of childcare. Aren't those economic factors the primary forces driving both men and women away from starting families, rather than it just being a Marxist conspiracy to neuter men?
Well, that is a very valid and common critique of his work. Mainstream demographers widely agree that the soaring cost of living, housing insecurity, and delayed economic milestones are the primary drivers of falling birth rates globally, almost regardless of a nation's specific family court structure.
Right, it's a global issue.
But Riker, however, filters all of these economic issues through a strictly gendered and historical lens.
How does he justify that?
He would counter that argument by pointing out that men historically worked through much harsher economic conditions, the Great Depression, world wars, extreme poverty, to provide for families.
Okay, fair point.
But he says they only did so because they had the legal assurance of a secure family unit and recognized patriarchal authority within that unit.
So the incentive was there.
Right. Take away the authority, remove the legal security, and the economic hurdles suddenly transform from obstacles to be overcome into insurmountable excuses to opt out.
I see. But to maintain this legal and economic trajectory without a massive social revolt, the culture has to justify it, right?
Yes.
So the author argues that medicine, academia, and the media had to systematically villainize traditional masculinity to make all of this acceptable to the general public.
Yeah, and the statistics he uses in this section are designed to highlight a stark societal double standard in how we view male sacrifice versus how we police male behavior.
Tell me about those stats.
For instance, he notes that 93% of all workplace deaths are men doing the most dangerous essential infrastructural jobs to keep society running. Yet 78% of all HR harassment complaints target male employees.
Wow.
He says society relies on male disposability, but heavily polices male presence.
And the medicalization of boyhood, that part was crazy. He points out that NHS prescriptions for stimulants like Ritalin in young boys jumped 400%.
400%.
From 92,000 prescriptions in 2010 to a staggering 368,000 in 2023.
That's a huge spike.
He calls this trading swords for Ritalin. He argues that society has changed the diagnostic criteria to essentially mistake natural male vigor, physical energy, and competitiveness for a psychiatric illness that needs to be medicated into compliance.
And he expands this concept from the medical field into pop culture, identifying what he terms the media villain fetish.
Media villain fetish. I like that term.
Yeah, this is the deliberate, retroactive cancellation or neutering of traditional male heroes in modern media.
Oh, yeah. He goes really hard on Hollywood here. He breaks down how narrative structures have fundamentally changed. Like, he talks about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, specifically Thor acting like a bumbling, emotionally fragile clown in Love and Thunder.
Right, turning him into a joke.
Yeah. And he brings up a 2023 BBC radio drama where Mr. Darcy, the classic stoic romantic lead, spends the entire time essentially apologizing for his male privilege.
Changing the core of the character.
Exactly. And he even mentions Han Solo being labeled in new academic literature and spin-off media as a narcissistic abuser rather than, a rogue hero.
And this extends deeply into academia, too. He contrasts the Matilda effect with what he coins the new Galileo effect.
The new Galileo effect.
Yeah. So the Matilda effect is a valid, recognized feminist critique that female scientists were historically overlooked or had their work credited to men.
Sure, that definitely happened.
But the author claims academia has now vastly overcorrected into the new Galileo effect, actively and deliberately scrubbing male contributors from modern textbooks to achieve artificial parity.
Do you have an example?
He uses the example of Charles Darwin being increasingly framed in curriculums as a problematic figure tied to colonial structures, while figures like Marie Curie are elevated beyond reproach without any critical historical context.
And he encapsulates all of this in what he calls the feminist double bind. Society demands that men be these stoic, unbreakable providers when there is a crisis. Like when the building is burning, when the pipes burst, when the power grid fails. Society demands traditional masculinity.
Everyone wants a tough guy then.
Exactly. But the absolute second that their competence, their assertiveness, or their traditional masculinity inconveniences modern progressive norms in an office setting, they are immediately labeled toxic.
Which leads to one of the most fascinating and counterintuitive sociological observations in the entire book.
Oh, the Sharia law thing?
Yes. The paradox of Sharia law in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
The author notes a startling statistic. 85% of the users of Sharia courts or Islamic arbitration councils in London are actually women.
Right. Now, you would think, based on modern Western narratives, that women would flee religious courts.
You would.
But they are actively choosing them. They are voluntarily trading their right to massive UK alimony payouts for a quick talaq divorce.
Which is fascinating.
It is. In Islamic law, talaq is traditionally pronounced by the husband, but these councils are allowing women to initiate the dissolution rapidly simply because the secular UK family law system has become so agonizingly adversarial, bureaucratic, and drawn out.
Yeah.
And the author points out the deafening silence from mainstream feminist groups on this phenomenon, claiming they refuse to criticize Sharia courts because of ideological bedfellows and a reluctance to critique minority religious practices, even when those practices highlight the failure of feminist legal reforms.
It's a huge blind spot, according to him.
But let me push back on the media argument for a second.
Oh,
The author points to Thor acting foolish or Mr. Darcy apologizing as proof of this massive, coordinated Marxist ideological carpet bombing.
right.
But couldn't this just be Hollywood chasing algorithms and focus groups? Like, they rate Thor as a clown because audiences laughed at the humor in Thor, Ragnarok, so the studio executives doubled down on it for profit.
That's the capitalism argument.
Yeah. Is it really a Marxist cabal in a writer's room trying to intentionally neuter men? Or is it just lazy capitalism trying to maximize ticket sales among a younger demographic?
It is the classic debate between malice and emergent behavior.
Right.
The author views it as a deliberate, top-down ideological project. A media analyst might view it simply as capitalism at work. Studios algorithmically optimizing content for a target demographic that happens to lean progressive.
Makes sense.
But, to the author's point, the result is exactly the same, regardless of the intent. The cultural archetype of unapologetic, competent masculinity is continuously deconstructed, subverted, or played for laughs.
It's gone, basically.
Yeah. And he argues that this constant cultural messaging has a profound, measurable psychological impact on young men who are desperately looking for positive role models.
So if the West is currently locked in this managed decline with legal traps, a demographic winter, and cultural erasure, where is the blueprint for a reversal?
He actually does have one.
Yeah, in the final section of the book, he outlines his solutions. He points to the Hungarian playbook and the concept of patriarchy 2.0. He actually points to a modern European nation that he believes has successfully recognized the crisis and reversed the tide.
Yes, he focuses intensely on Hungary post-2010. He holds up their sweeping legislative reforms as the ultimate counter-narrative to Britain's decline.
What did they do?
He details how Hungary fundamentally restructured the financial incentives of family formation. For one, they capped alimony at a strict maximum of 3 years to prevent it from becoming a lifelong pension.
Just 3 years. That's a huge change.
Massive. They also implemented the CSO program, offering massive, non-refundable state grants and tax breaks for families who commit to having 3 or more children.
Okay, direct financial incentives.
Exactly. And most importantly, from a legal standpoint, they explicitly codified marriage in their 2012 constitution, the fundamental law of Hungary, defining it strictly as an institution between a man and a woman, specifically aimed at demographic survival.
And the results he cites to back this up are pretty hard to ignore. Since those policies were implemented, Hungarian fertility rates climbed 25%, and their divorce rate plummeted to 31%.
It worked, essentially.
Yeah. He includes this viral post from an anonymous British expat that perfectly captures the sentiment. The post just says, "I moved to Budapest. Here, marriage isn't a suicide pact."
Wow. And for the author, Hungary proves that demographic collapse is not an inevitable, unstoppable force of nature. It is a direct result of policy choices.
But what about the guys who can't just move to Europe?
Right, for the men who cannot simply pack up and move to Budapest, he outlines a series of domestic survival strategies, heavily drawing from MGTOW.
Men going their own way.
Yes.
Yeah, he talks about covert unplugging. This is where we get into the actual practical mechanics of how men are hiding their resources.
Getting off the grid financially.
Exactly. He advises guys to stash their wealth in untraceable cryptocurrencies like Monero, and he explains why Monero is different.
How so?
Because, unlike Bitcoin, where every single transaction is visible on a public blockchain ledger that a divorce lawyer can easily subpoena, Monero uses ring signatures and stealth addresses to completely obscure the sender, the receiver, and the amount.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he is
Sure.
literally advising men on the technical mechanisms of making their wealth invisible to family court judges.
He also outlines the concept of financial vasectomies.
Which is a great term.
It is. This isn't just about avoiding pregnancy, it is about structuring assets. It involves placing wealth into offshore asset protection trusts before a relationship even begins, ensuring that the capital is legally untouchable by domestic family courts.
Wow.
And for those who do marry, he notes the massive rise of unbreakable postnups, legal agreements drafted after marriage to essentially retrofit the union and ring-fence assets.
Ultimately, his call to action is aggressive and uncompromising. I mean, he wants to repeal no-fault divorce entirely, effectively locking the exit doors unless there is proven abuse or adultery.
He wants to trap the system back.
Yeah, he wants mandatory jail time for paternity fraudsters. He wants to abolish alimony completely, and he wants society to legally and culturally embrace what he terms patriarchy 2.0.
Which he sees already starting.
Right. He sees the seeds of this manifesting in the rise of parallel male-driven educational institutions. He points to places like the London Intellectual Forum, where young men are entirely bypassing traditional mainstream universities to study stoicism, evolutionary psychology, and game theory among themselves.
The full institutional opt-out.
It is. But here's my final hang-up with his philosophy, and I think it's a massive contradiction.
Let's hear it.
The author aggressively champions Hungary's massive state intervention, like tax breaks, constitutional mandates, state-sponsored housing grants, all to promote the traditional family.
Right, heavy government involvement.
Exactly. But for the entire first half of the book, he heavily criticized the very concept of state intervention in marriage through the UK courts. How does he reconcile wanting the government completely out of men's wallets, but simultaneously wanting the government to legally and financially engineer traditional families?
That is the central ideological knot of the entire text. I mean, he decries state power when it is used as a mechanism to redistribute wealth from men to women, but he actively cheers for state power when it is used to enforce and subsidize traditional patriarchal structures.
Seems like a double standard.
He would likely argue that state power itself is a neutral tool. You know, it is the underlying ideology wielding that tool that matters.
Okay, I see.
He believes the state should actively subsidize the nuclear family because it is the fundamental building block of a functioning civilization. Whereas the current state subsidizes single motherhood and divorce, which he views as the mechanics of civilizational decay.
It is a heavy, intense, and deeply provocative read. And after going through all this, it is crystal clear why it's making such massive waves across the internet.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. Remember, if you want to read the source material for yourself and examine his arguments firsthand, you can go check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy the ebook, Britain's Abortion and Divorce Epidemic, The Downfall of the Patriarchy.
Highly recommend giving it a read.
And do not forget to follow the author at Conrad Reicher on Substack. Again, that's conradreicher.substack.com.
As we close out this analysis, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, drawing directly from the core thesis of the book.
Yeah.
The author argues that biology doesn't negotiate.
Right.
If a society continuously legislates against the evolutionary imperatives of half its population, it doesn't achieve equality. It achieves extinction.
Wow.
Whether you view his book as a vital survival manual for the modern man or just a controversial polemic, it forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable civilization-scale question.
Right.
What happens to a society when its builders decide to go on strike?
It goes right back to that mortgage contract we talked about at the very beginning. If the bank changes the rules so drastically that signing the paper virtually guarantees you will lose the house, eventually people are just going to stop walking into the bank entirely.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.